Have you ever looked around at your family and wondered how you ended up being the only one who seems to have their life together? I mean, really looked at them past all the excuses and explanations, past the years of enabling and codependency, and just seen them for who they truly are? That moment of clarity hit me when I was 23 years old, standing in the doorway of my older brother Marcus's room, staring at 9 plates of moldy, rotting food he'd hidden under his bed, like some kind of deranged squirrel preparing for a very disgusting winter. The smell hit me first, this overwhelming wave of decay that made my eyes water and my stomach turn. But what really got to me wasn't the stench or even the health hazard of it all. It was what happened when I showed my mother, Elena, the photos I'd taken on my phone. Marcus just laughed. This deep belly laugh like I'd told the funniest joke in the world, and said, "Sarah takes cleanliness way too seriously, doesn't she, Mom?" And my mother, bless her eternally enabling heart, just sighed and said maybe I should focus on my own room instead of bothering Marcus. That was 11 months ago, and I haven't spoken to either of them since. Well, that's not entirely true. Marcus posted his new retail supervisor badge on social media last week, fishing for congratulations and praise from everyone who didn't know he was 35 years old. And this was his first real job in over a decade. I didn't comment, but I did notice our cousin Linda wrote, "So proud of you," with 3 heart emojis. If only she knew the whole story. You see, my entire family tree is populated with men who somehow never learned how to be adults. It's like there's this genetic predisposition to avoiding responsibility that gets passed down from father to son, generation after generation. And the women? We're the ones who pick up the pieces, make the excuses, and work ourselves into early graves trying to support these perpetual children masquerading as grown men. I first realized something was deeply wrong with my family when I was 14 years old. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October, and I'd just gotten home from school to find Marcus, who was then 27, still in his pajamas at 3 in the afternoon, playing video games in the living room. This wasn't unusual, mind you. What was unusual was that I suddenly found myself angry about it. Really, truly angry in a way that surprised me. Why don't you have a job?" I asked him, standing between him and the television screen. He paused his game, annoyed, and looked at me like I'd asked him why he didn't have wings. "Jobs are for suckers," he said, unpausing his game and leaning to the side to see around me. "Besides, why would I need a job when Mom takes care of everything?" I remember walking into the kitchen where my mother was preparing dinner after her 10-hour shift at the medical billing company where she worked. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide, and I felt this surge of protectiveness that I'd never experienced before. "Mom, why is Marcus still living here?" I asked, keeping my voice low so he wouldn't hear from the living room. "He's almost 30. Shouldn't he have his own place by now?" She stopped chopping vegetables and looked at me with this expression I'll never forget. It was equal parts sadness, resignation, and something else I couldn't quite identify at the time, but now recognize as shame. "Your brother just needs more time to figure things out," she said, resuming her chopping with more force than necessary. "Not everyone moves at the same pace, Sarah. You'll understand when you're older." But Mom, you're working yourself to death while he sits around all day playing games. How is that fair?" She put down the knife and turned to face me fully. "Life isn't about what's fair, sweetheart. It's about family, and family takes care of each other and sat. Dasdar. Seems like you're the only one doing the taking care of part," I muttered, but she'd already turned back to her vegetables, the conversation clearly over. That night, I lay in bed thinking about all the times I'd seen my mother come home exhausted, all the overtime shifts she'd picked up, all the vacations we'd never taken because there was never enough money. And then I thought about Marcus, who hadn't contributed a dime to the household since he dropped out of community college 8 years earlier. The anger I'd felt earlier hadn't subsided. If anything, it had grown into something bigger, something that felt like determination. The next day, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my life. I walked into the guidance counselor's office and asked about accelerated programs, AP classes, anything that would help me get into a good college with a full scholarship. Mrs. Chen, the counselor, seemed surprised by my sudden academic ambition. "This is quite a change, Sarah," she said, pulling up my transcript on her computer. "Your grades are good, but they could be better. What's motivating this sudden interest in acceleration?" I thought about telling her the truth, about how I needed to escape before I got trapped in the same cycle of enabling and codependency that had ensnared my mother. But instead, I just said, "I want more options for my future." She smiled and started printing out forms. "Well, let's see what we can do about that." For the next 3 years, I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that surprised everyone, including myself. I took every AP class available, joined the debate team, volunteered at the local food bank on weekends, and maintained a part-time job at a frozen yogurt shop downtown. My mother was proud but confused by my sudden transformation. "You're working too hard, honey," she'd say when she'd find me studying at 2 in the morning. "You need to enjoy being young." But I couldn't enjoy being young when I saw what being young meant in my family. It meant being 35 and unemployed, living in your childhood bedroom, letting your mother wash your underwear while you achieved new high scores in whatever game was popular that month. And then there was my father, Raymond. Oh, where do I even begin with Raymond? He was somehow even worse than Marcus because at least Marcus was consistently useless. My father was inconsistently criminal, which created a special kind of chaos in our lives. Raymond had what he called entrepreneurial spirit, which was really just a fancy way of saying he was allergic to legitimate employment. He was always involved in some scheme or another, buying things that fell off trucks and reselling them online, running illegal poker games in the back room of his friend's bar, occasionally disappearing for weeks at a time on business trips that usually ended with late-night calls from holding cells in neighboring states. I was 17 when things with Raymond reached a breaking point. It was my senior year of high school, and I hadn't seen him in 3 weeks, which wasn't entirely unusual, but was long enough to be concerning. I found my mother sitting at the kitchen table one morning, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. "Where's Dad?" I asked, even though something in her expression told me I didn't really want to know the answer. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "He's been arrested," she whispered, as if saying it too loudly would make it more real. "Federal charges this time. Something about interstate trafficking of stolen goods." I sat down across from her, my mind racing. Federal charges meant federal prison. It meant lawyers we couldn't afford and a shame that would follow us around our small town in Connecticut like a storm cloud. "How bad is it?" I asked. 3 to 5 years if he takes a plea deal," she said, her voice hollow. "More if he goes to trial." I reached across the table and took her hand. It was cold and trembling slightly. "We'll get through this," I said, even though I had no idea how. "We always do." But even as I said it, I was thinking about the acceptance letters that would be coming soon, about the scholarship applications I'd submitted, about the future I was building for myself brick by brick. I felt guilty for thinking about escape when my mother needed me most, but I also knew that if I didn't get out soon, I never would. The next few months were a blur of court dates, lawyer meetings, and hushed phone conversations. Raymond eventually took a plea deal for 4 years with the possibility of parole in 2. My mother aged a decade in those months, the stress etching new lines around her eyes and mouth. Marcus, true to form, was utterly useless during this crisis. He complained that the stress was affecting his gaming performance and actually had the audacity to suggest that we should sell the house to pay for a better lawyer for Dad. "It's not like we need all this space," he said one evening over dinner. "We could get a smaller place, use the extra money to help Dad. The house is the only thing we own outright," my mother said quietly. "It's paid off. It's our security." "Security," Marcus scoffed. "What good is security when Dad's rotting in prison?" I slammed my fork down, unable to contain my anger any longer. Maybe if you got a job and contributed something, anything to this family, we'd have more options. But no, you just sit there in your fortress of filth playing games while Mom kills herself trying to keep us afloat." He glared at me. "Not everyone can be perfect like you, Sarah. Not everyone gets straight A's and scholarship offers." You're right," I shot back. "Not everyone can be perfect, but everyone can try to be better than a parasite." "Sarah," my mother gasped, but I was already pushing back from the table and heading to my room. That night, I made another decision. I would stay. Despite every fiber of my being screaming at me to run, to take the full scholarship to Northwestern University and never look back, I would stay. My mother needed me, and I couldn't abandon her to deal with Marcus and the fallout from Raymond's arrest alone. So I declined Northwestern. I declined Boston University. I declined every escape route I'd worked so hard to create. Instead, I enrolled at the local community college and got a full-time job at a Tex-Mex restaurant in the mall, telling myself it was temporary, just until things stabilized. My mother cried when I told her I was staying local for college. "You had such amazing opportunities," she said. "I don't want you to sacrifice your future for us." "It's not a sacrifice," I lied. "I can transfer after a couple of years. This makes more financial sense." She hugged me then, and I felt the weight of her relief, how much she'd been dreading being alone with Marcus while dealing with Raymond's incarceration. I hugged her back and tried not to think about what I was giving up. Working at Casa Miguel's was mind-numbing in its repetitiveness. Every day was the same cycle of taking orders, serving plates of enchiladas and fajitas, refilling chips and salsa, and pretending to be cheerful for customers who often treated servers like furniture, but it paid reasonably well with tips, and I needed every penny. Between my wages and my mother's salary, we were managing to keep the household running, pay for Raymond's commissary account, and even chip away at the credit card debt my mother had accumulated during the lean years. Marcus, of course, contributed nothing except complaints about the quality of the groceries we could afford and requests for money to upgrade his gaming setup. I remember one particular evening about 6 months into this new arrangement. I'd just finished a double shift and was exhausted, my feet aching and my clothes smelling like a combination of grease and industrial-strength cleaning products. I walked into the house to find Marcus on the couch, exactly where I'd left him 12 hours earlier, surrounded by empty energy drink cans and chip bags. "Hey," he said without looking up from his game. "Mom left dinner in the fridge, but it's that healthy stuff again. Can you pick up some pizza on your way home tomorrow?" I stood there for a moment, just staring at him, feeling something inside me snap like a overstretched rubber band. "No," I said. He paused his game and looked at me, genuinely surprised. "What?" I said no. "If you want pizza, you can get a job and buy it yourself." He laughed. That same dismissive laugh from when I'd found the moldy plates. "Come on, Sarah, don't be like that. It's just pizza." "It's never just pizza," I said, my voice rising. "It's pizza and energy drinks and new games and faster internet and everything else you want while contributing absolutely nothing. I'm 19 years old, Marcus. I should be in a dorm room at Northwestern right now, studying and making friends and building my future. Instead, I'm here, working doubles to support a 32-year-old man who can't even be bothered to take his dishes to the kitchen." His face darkened. "Nobody asked you to stay. You chose this." "I chose this because someone has to help Mom, and it sure as hell wasn't going to be you." We stared at each other for a long moment, years of resentment crackling in the air between us. Then he unpaused his game and turned back to the screen, dismissing me as easily as he dismissed every responsibility in his life. That night, I lay in bed and made lists in my head. Lists of what I was paying for, lists of what I was sacrificing, lists of how many years I could do this before I turned into my mother, worn down and resigned to a life of supporting men who refused to support themselves. The answer came to me with startling clarity. Not many. My 20th birthday passed with little fanfare. My mother made a cake. Marcus actually emerged from his room to eat a piece, and I received a collect call from Raymond wishing me a happy birthday and asking if I could put a little extra in his commissary account this month because he needed new shoes. It was during that phone call that I had my second moment of clarity. As I listened to my father manipulate me with stories of how hard prison life was, how the other inmates respected him less because he couldn't afford certain items, how he was trying to network inside for business opportunities when he got out, I realized something profound. He hadn't asked me a single question about my life. Not about school, not about work, not about my hopes or dreams or fears. The entire 15-minute call was about him and what he needed. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and did some math. Between what we were sending to Raymond and what we were spending on Marcus's lifestyle, we were hemorrhaging nearly $1,200 a month. $1,200 that could have gone toward my mother's retirement fund, or fixing the leaking roof, or even just allowing her to work fewer hours. I decided then that something had to change. I couldn't keep enabling the enablers. I couldn't keep sacrificing my future for men who wouldn't sacrifice an hour of gaming time for their family. The next morning, I sat down with my mother before she left for work. "We need to talk about the household budget," I said, spreading out the papers I'd prepared the night before. She glanced at them nervously. "Is something wrong? Are we short this month?" "Worse so. We're short every month," I said. "Look at this. We're sending Dad $300 a month for commissary. The prison provides basic necessities. Everything else is extras. But he wants," I corrected. "There's a difference. And Marcus, do you realize we're spending almost $900 a month on his food, his games, his subscriptions? That's more than most people pay in rent." She studied the numbers, and I could see the reality sinking in. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we make some changes. Cut Dad's commissary money in half. Give Marcus an ultimatum. Get a job and start contributing or find somewhere else to live." "Sarah, I can't just throw your brother out on the street." "Why not?" I challenged. "He's 33 years old, Mom. Most people his age have careers, families, mortgages. He has a high score in Call of Duty." She rubbed her temples, a gesture I'd seen her make countless times when stressed. "You're right, I know you're right. But actually doing it? That's different. He's my son." "And I'm your daughter," I said quietly. "But you don't seem to worry about what this is doing to me." That hit home. I could see it in the way her face crumpled slightly before she caught herself. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I've been a terrible mother." No," I said, reaching for her hand. "You've been a trapped mother. There's a difference. But we can change this, Mom, together." She squeezed my hand and nodded. "Okay, we'll talk to Marcus tonight. Together." That conversation did not go well. Marcus threw what can only be described as an adult tantrum when we told him he had 1 month to find a job or he'd need to find somewhere else to live. He yelled about betrayal, about how we didn't understand him, about how the job market was impossible, about how his online friendships were more meaningful than anything we could understand. "Whoa, your online friends can't pay rent," I pointed out, which only made him angrier. "You've poisoned her against me," he spat at me. "This is all you're doing. You've always been jealous that I don't conform to society's expectations." "I'm jealous that you don't conform to basic hygiene standards," I retorted, which was petty but felt good in the moment. My mother, to her credit, held firm despite the emotional manipulation. She repeated the ultimatum, 1 month to find employment or other living arrangements. Marcus stormed off to his room, slamming the door so hard that a picture fell off the hallway wall. The next few weeks were tense. Marcus emerged from his room only for meals, which he ate in sullen silence before retreating back to his gaming den. He made no effort to look for work, probably believing this was just another empty threat that would blow over if he waited it out. But I wasn't going to let it blow over. I printed out job applications from every retail store, restaurant, and warehouse in a 10-mile radius. I left them in neat piles outside his door. I circled help-wanted ads in the newspaper and taped them to the bathroom mirror. I was relentless in my campaign to force him to face reality. Meanwhile, I had a conversation with Raymond that would prove to be pivotal. He called one evening, and after his usual requests for money and complaints about prison life, I interrupted him. Dad, I need to ask you something," I said, "and I need you to be honest with me." "Of course, Princess. You can ask me anything." "Are you using the commissary money for gambling?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its usual smooth charm. "Who told you that? Does it matter? Is it true?" "It's not gambling," he said defensively. "It's strategic investments in relationships that will pay off when—" I hung up on him. I'd heard enough. When he called back the next day, I didn't accept the charges. That evening, I showed my mother the phone records. Multiple calls from the same numbers, men who'd been released from prison and were looking for Raymond, talking about debts and payments due. "He's been lying to us," I said gently. "The money isn't for protection or necessities. He's gambling with it." She didn't cry. I think she was beyond tears at that point. She just nodded slowly and said, "No more commissary money beyond the basic $20 a month for hygiene items." "He'll be angry," I warned. "Let him be angry," she said, and there was steel in her voice I'd never heard before. "I'm tired of managing everyone else's emotions at the expense of my own." The month deadline for Marcus came and went. He hadn't applied for a single job, hadn't even pretended to make an effort. On the appointed day, my mother and I packed his belongings into boxes and garbage bags while he was asleep. When he woke up at his usual time of 2 p.m, we were waiting in the living room with his things. "You can't be serious," he said, looking at the boxes in disbelief. "Your cousin Tony said you can stay with him for a while," my mother said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "He's expecting you." "Zessors, this is illegal," Marcus shouted. "You can't just evict me. I have rights." "You have 30 days' notice in writing," I said, holding up the formal eviction notice I'd researched and prepared. "That was 31 days ago. We're being more than fair." What followed was ugly. Marcus said things designed to wound, bringing up every failing, every mistake my mother had ever made as a parent. He called her weak, pathetic, a failure. He called me heartless, manipulative, a bitch who would die alone because no one could ever love someone so cold. But we held firm. We loaded his belongings into my car and drove him to Tony's apartment. Tony, who was only 25 but had already been living on his own for 7 years, seemed embarrassed by the whole situation. He helped us unload quickly, avoiding eye contact with everyone. As we drove away, leaving Marcus standing on the sidewalk surrounded by garbage bags full of his possessions, my mother broke down. She cried so hard I had to pull over because I was worried about her hyperventilating. "I failed him," she sobbed. "I failed as a mother." "No," I said firmly, turning to face her. "You loved him. You gave him every opportunity. He failed himself." We sat there on the side of the road for nearly an hour while she cried out decades of frustration and guilt. When she finally calmed down, she looked lighter somehow, as if shedding Marcus had physically removed a weight from her shoulders. The house felt different without Marcus. Quieter, certainly, but also cleaner, more peaceful. The constant tension that had permeated every room began to dissipate. My mother started sleeping better, and I noticed she was humming while cooking dinner, something she hadn't done in years. 2 weeks after Marcus left, we got an unexpected call from Tony. Marcus had been caught stealing from Tony's roommate and had been kicked out. He was now couch surfing with various online gaming friends, burning through his limited social capital at an alarming rate. "I just thought you should know," Tony said awkwardly, "in case he tries to come back." "Thank you for telling us," my mother said, "and I'm sorry he put you in that position." After she hung up, we changed the locks. It seemed like a harsh step, but we both knew Marcus would eventually try to worm his way back in, and we needed to be prepared to hold our boundaries. Raymond, meanwhile, was not handling the reduction in his commissary money well. His calls became increasingly aggressive, oscillating between rage and manipulation. He accused us of abandoning him, of not understanding the dangerous position we were putting him in, of being selfish and cruel. During one particularly nasty call, he made the mistake of threatening me. "When I get out of there," he snarled, "you're going to regret crossing me, little girl." I recorded that call and sent it to his parole officer. His phone privileges were restricted for 6 months. With both Marcus and Raymond's financial drains plugged, our household finances improved dramatically. For the first time in years, my mother could put money into savings. She bought herself new work clothes, got her hair done at a real salon instead of cutting it herself in the bathroom mirror, and even started talking about taking a vacation. I, meanwhile, was finally able to think about my own future again. I'd been taking classes at the community college while working, maintaining a 4.0 GPA despite the chaos at home. Now, with some breathing room, I started researching transfer opportunities. One evening, while I was filling out transfer applications, my mother sat down beside me with 2 cups of tea. "State University has a good social work program," she said, looking at my screen. "Yeah, I'm applying to several schools," I said, "including Northwestern. They keep my acceptance on file for 2 years. She was quiet for a moment. "You should go," she said finally. "If they accept you again, you should go." "Mom, I can't leave you alone." You won't be leaving me alone," she interrupted. "You'll be living your life. There's a difference." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she was right. The woman sitting beside me wasn't the same exhausted, defeated person I'd been trying to protect 2 years ago. She was stronger now, more confident. She'd remembered who she was beyond being a caretaker for ungrateful men. Besides, she added with a small smile, "I've been seeing someone." I nearly spit out my tea. "What? Who? When?" She blushed like a teenager. "His name is William. He's an accountant at a firm next to my office. We've been having lunch together for a few months, and last week he asked me to dinner." "Mom, that's wonderful," I said, genuinely thrilled. "Tell me everything." As she talked about William, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen since before my father's arrest. He sounded lovely, stable, employed, respectful, everything Raymond had never been. Spring arrived with acceptance letters and new possibilities. I was accepted to State University with a partial scholarship, and Northwestern offered me a place in their social work program with financial aid. The decision should have been difficult, but it wasn't. It was time for me to pursue my own dreams. Marcus resurfaced occasionally, usually through manipulative messages on social media about how we'd ruined his life, how he was homeless because of us. He wasn't. He was living with a girlfriend who apparently had even lower standards than we did, how family was supposed to stick together no matter what. I blocked him on everything. Raymond was released on parole after serving 3 years. He didn't come home. He went to stay with an old associate in Philadelphia, promising my mother he was going straight this time, that he had a legitimate job lined up, that he wanted to make things right. She filed for divorce 2 weeks later. "I don't believe him anymore," she told me over dinner at our favorite restaurant. "And more importantly, I don't care if he's telling the truth. I'm done." The divorce was uncontested. Raymond was too busy trying to establish himself in Philadelphia to fight it, and besides, there was nothing to fight over. The house was in my mother's name, purchased with inheritance from her parents before she met Raymond. There were no significant assets to divide, no custody issues to resolve, just paperwork that officially ended a marriage that had been dead for years. William proposed to my mother on her 50th birthday at the same restaurant where they'd had their first official date. She called me at Northwestern, crying happy tears to share the news. "He's nothing like your father," she kept saying. "He's kind and steady, and he has a retirement account." I laughed at that last part, but I understood what she meant. After years of chaos and financial instability, a man with a retirement account represented security in a way that was almost romantic. Their wedding was small and beautiful, held in William's backyard with just family and close friends. I was my mother's maid of honor, and I watched her walk down the aisle with a lightness in her step that made my heart swell. She'd found happiness on the other side of enabling, and it gave me hope for my own future. Marcus didn't attend. He'd been invited. My mother insisted on it despite my objections, but he declined, saying he couldn't support her betrayal of our father. It was just as well. His absence meant we could actually enjoy the day without drama. I graduated from Northwestern with honors and immediately began working at a family counseling center in Chicago. My personal experience with enabling and codependency made me particularly effective at helping other families break similar cycles. There was something deeply satisfying about using my pain to help others find their way to healthier dynamics. One day, about a year into my career, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Marcus. He was 38 now and had finally hit rock bottom. His girlfriend had kicked him out, he'd lost another job, and he was living in a shelter. He wanted to know if I could send him money for a bus ticket home. I stared at that message for a long time, feeling the old, familiar tug of family obligation. But I also remembered all the times we'd tried to help him, all the opportunities he'd squandered, all the bridges he'd burned. I typed back a single sentence. I can send you a list of resources for job training programs in your area. He responded with a string of profanities and accusations. I blocked the number. That night, I called my mother to tell her about Marcus's message. She sighed heavily. I pray for him every day, she said, but praying for someone doesn't mean enabling them. Are you okay? I asked. I'm sad, she admitted. I'll always be sad about Marcus, but I'm also at peace. I did what I could for as long as I could. His choices are his own. We talked for a while longer about lighter things, William's retirement plans, the vegetable garden they were planting, the cruise they were booking for their anniversary. After we hung up, I sat in my Chicago apartment, looking out at the city lights, and reflected on how far we'd all come. My mother had broken free from decades of enabling and found genuine happiness. I had built the career and life I'd dreamed of during those dark days of working doubles at Casa Miguel's. Even Marcus, in his own dysfunctional way, was living with the consequences of his choices rather than being shielded from them. As for Raymond, I heard through the family grapevine that he was back in prison, this time for a parole violation involving check fraud. I felt nothing when I heard the news. Not anger, not sadness, not even satisfaction. Just nothing. He had become irrelevant to my life. A cautionary tale about the men in my bloodline rather than an active presence. But here's the thing about generational cycles. Breaking them isn't a one-time event. It's a daily choice, a constant vigilance against sliding back into old patterns. I see it in my work every day. Families struggling to change dynamics that have been in place for decades. And I see it in myself, in the moments when I have to consciously choose not to overfunction for others, not to sacrifice my own needs for someone who won't help themselves. I think about the children I might have someday and the legacy I want to leave them, not one of enabling and codependency, but one of boundaries and self-respect. I want them to know that loving someone doesn't mean lighting yourself on fire to keep them warm. It doesn't mean working yourself into exhaustion while they refuse to work at all. Love, real love, includes accountability. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if we'd set boundaries earlier, if my mother had refused to enable Marcus from the beginning, if she'd left Raymond the first time he got arrested instead of waiting until the third. But dwelling on what-ifs doesn't change anything. We did the best we could with the awareness we had at the time. The important thing is that we eventually found the strength to change. I still work at the Family Counseling Center, though I've been promoted to a supervisory role. Every day I sit across from families in crisis, families that remind me so much of my own. I see the exhausted mothers, the entitled adult children, the absent or destructive fathers. And I try to help them see what took my family so long to understand, that enabling isn't love. It's fear dressed up in love's clothing. My mother and William just celebrated their 5th wedding anniversary. She sent me pictures from their trip to Italy, and in every photo, she's smiling with her whole face, not just her mouth. She looks younger now than she did when she was actually young, freed from the weight of carrying grown men who refused to carry themselves. Marcus resurfaced again last year, clean and sober and working at a warehouse. He reached out through a cousin, wanting to reconcile, claiming he'd changed. My mother and I discussed it at length before deciding to meet him for coffee. Just coffee in a public place. with clear boundaries about what we would and wouldn't discuss. He looked older, harder, like life had finally caught up with him, but he also looked clearer, more present than I'd ever seen him. He apologized, taking responsibility for his choices in a way that seemed genuine. He didn't ask for money or a place to stay. He just wanted to apologize and let us know he was trying to do better. We left that meeting cautiously optimistic, but maintained our boundaries. We text occasionally now, surface-level communications about weather and work. Maybe someday we'll have a real relationship, but that would require years of consistent behavior change on his part. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm also not closing the door entirely. People can change, I've seen it in my work, but they have to want it for themselves, not because others are forcing them. Raymond died in prison 2 years ago, heart attack at 59, a lifetime of poor choices finally catching up with him. My mother cried when she got the news, but they were complicated tears. Grief for the man he could have been, relief that a chapter was finally closed, guilt for feeling that relief. We attended the small service his sister arranged, more for closure than out of obligation. Standing at his graveside, I thought about the cycles that had shaped our family for generations. Raymond's father had been an alcoholic who abandoned the family when Raymond was 12. His grandfather had been a gambler who lost the family farm. The pattern stretched back as far as anyone could remember. Men who took and took until there was nothing left to take. Women who gave and gave until there was nothing left of themselves. But patterns can be broken. Cycles can be interrupted. It takes enormous strength and usually considerable pain, but it's possible. I'm living proof of that. My mother is living proof of that. Even Marcus, in his stumbling, imperfect way, might be proof of that. I often think about that moment with the moldy plates, how it crystallized everything wrong with our family dynamic. Such a small thing, really, hidden dishes under a bed, but it represented so much more, the expectation that someone else would clean up your mess. The entitlement to live in filth, while others maintained the space around you. The casual dismissal of anyone who dared to point out the problem. In my work, I've learned to watch for these moments in the families I counsel, the small revelations that illuminate larger patterns, the breaking points that can become turning points if people are ready to see them for what they are. Last month, I worked with a family that reminded me so much of my own, it was almost painful. An exhausted single mother, 2 adult sons living at home without contributing, a daughter who'd put her life on hold to help support everyone. During our 3rd session, the daughter broke down crying, saying she felt like she was drowning, like she was watching her life slip away while she took care of people who wouldn't take care of themselves. I looked at her and saw myself at 19, crying in my car after another double shift, wondering if this was all my life would ever be. And I told her what I wished someone had told me then, that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself, that boundaries aren't cruel, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their dysfunction. The mother in that session got angry at first, accusing me of trying to break up her family, but the daughter heard me. I could see it in her eyes, that same spark of recognition I'd felt all those years ago. She came back for individual sessions, and slowly, painfully, she began to set boundaries. Last I heard, she'd enrolled in nursing school and moved into her own apartment. Her brothers were furious. Her mother was distraught, but she was free. That's the thing about breaking generational cycles. It often looks like betrayal to those still caught in them. When you stop participating in the dysfunction, you force others to see it clearly, and that clarity can be painful. It's easier to blame the person who stopped playing along than to examine why the game exists in the first place. But the freedom on the other side of that pain is worth it. The ability to love without losing yourself, to help without enabling, to maintain relationships without sacrificing your own growth. These are the rewards of doing the hard work of change. I'm 31 now, older than Marcus was when we finally kicked him out, but decades ahead of where he was in terms of emotional maturity and life skills. I have my own apartment in Chicago, a career I'm passionate about, healthy relationships with friends who reciprocate care and support. I date occasionally, always watchful for signs of the entitlement and irresponsibility that plagued the men in my family. When I see those red flags, I walk away. I've learned that lesson too well to ignore it. My mother likes to joke that William has ruined her for other men, that she could never go back to chaos after experiencing what a healthy relationship feels like. But it's not really a joke. Once you've experienced mutual respect and shared responsibility, anything less feels intolerable. The bar that was once on the floor is now where it should be, at a place of basic adult functionality and emotional reciprocity. Sometimes I get messages from extended family members, usually around the holidays, suggesting that I should reach out more to Marcus or that I should have done more for Raymond before he died. They don't understand why I maintain such firm boundaries, why I won't let bygones be bygones and just be a family again. To them, I explain as gently as I can that being family doesn't mean accepting any behavior, no matter how destructive. It doesn't mean pouring your resources into a bottomless pit of need. It doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when they're pretty stubborn. They're saying no, it is under what their own fire, but choose not to. Real family, I've learned, is about mutual support, not one-sided drain. It's about growing together, not one person growing while others actively hold them back. It's about love that empowers rather than enables, that challenges rather than coddles. My mother understands this now. In her marriage to William, she's experiencing what family should be, a partnership where both people contribute, where problems are solved together, where one person's success is celebrated by the other rather than resented or exploited. She's making up for lost time, traveling and pursuing hobbies she never had energy for when she was supporting 2 adult dependents. I visited her and William last weekend. They've moved to a smaller house in a quiet suburb, with a garden that my mother tends with the dedication she once reserved for managing Marcus's moods and Raymond's chaos. As we sat on their back deck, drinking lemonade and watching the sunset, she said something that stayed with me. "I used to think I was helping them," she said, referring to Marcus and Raymond. "I thought if I just loved them enough, supported them enough, they'd eventually get their acts together. But I wasn't helping them. I was hurting them. I was stealing their consequences. And without consequences, why would they ever change?" She was right, of course. Every time she'd bailed Raymond out, she'd robbed him of the opportunity to face the results of his choices. Every time she'd made excuses for Marcus, she'd enabled him to avoid taking responsibility for his life. Her love, however well-intentioned, had become a prison for all of them. But that's the insidious nature of enabling. It feels like love. It looks like love to outside observers. It's only when you step back and see the bigger picture that you realize it's actually fear. Fear of conflict, fear of abandonment, fear of being seen as a bad mother or wife. And that fear keeps everyone stuck, the enabler and the enabled alike. I carry these lessons with me every day, both in my personal life and in my work. When I'm tempted to overfunction for someone, to solve problems they need to solve themselves, I remember the moldy plates under Marcus's bed. I remember my mother's exhausted face as she worked overtime to support able-bodied adults. I remember my own dreams deferred in service of maintaining a dysfunctional system. And I choose differently. I choose to love with boundaries, to help without enabling, to support without sacrificing myself. It's not always easy, those old patterns run deep, and there's always a voice in my head suggesting that maybe this time, if I just give a little more, sacrifice a little more, things will be different. But things are never different when you keep doing the same thing. Change requires changed behavior, not just changed intentions. It requires the courage to disappoint people, to be seen as selfish or cold, to prioritize your own growth over maintaining someone else's comfort in their dysfunction. As I write this, sitting in my Chicago apartment with a cup of tea and my laptop, I'm struck by how different my life is from what it could have been. If I'd never set boundaries, I'd probably still be in Connecticut, working doubles at Casa Miguel's, sending money to to commissary accounts and funding gaming habits. I'd be tired and resentful and slowly disappearing into the role of family savior. Instead, I'm here, building a life of my own choosing, helping other families break their cycles of dysfunction. It's not the path I originally planned, Northwestern at 18, straight into a career, but it's perhaps more meaningful because of the detours. My experiences give me credibility with the families I work with. When I talk about the pain of enabling and the freedom of boundaries, I'm not speaking from textbooks. I'm speaking from lived experience. And that experience tells me this: every family has its patterns, its cycles, its dysfunctions. Some are more severe than others, but none are unchangeable. It takes one person deciding to do something different, one person willing to withstand the discomfort of breaking the pattern, to create the possibility of change for everyone. In my family, I was that person, not because I was special or particularly strong, but because I hit my breaking point first. Those moldy plates under the bed were my moment of clarity, my cannot unsee this revelation about what our family had become. Someone else might have cleaned them up and moved on, adding it to the long list of things we didn't talk about. But for me, in that moment, they became a symbol of everything that needed to change. And so I changed it, imperfectly, painfully, with plenty of mistakes along the way, but persistently. And in changing my own participation in the family dysfunction, I created space for my mother to change hers. And who knows? Maybe one day Marcus will find his own moment of clarity, his own moldy plates that force him to see what his life has become. Or maybe he won't. Maybe he'll spend his whole life blaming others for his circumstances, waiting for someone to save him from himself. That's his choice to make, just as enabling him was our choice, until it wasn't. The beautiful thing about boundaries is that they free you from needing to control other people's choices. When you're enmeshed in dysfunction, you're constantly trying to manage others' behaviors, to minimize damage, to prevent consequences. It's exhausting and ultimately futile, but when you step back and focus on your own choices, your own boundaries, your own growth, you reclaim your energy for building the life you want. I think about the young woman I counsel who's struggling with similar issues. Adult siblings who won't work, parents who enable, dreams deferred in service of family dysfunction. I see their pain and remember my own, but I also see their potential, the lives they could build if they can find the courage to change the only thing they can control: themselves. Some of them will find that courage. They'll set boundaries, weather the backlash, and emerge on the other side with lives of their own choosing. Others will stay stuck, adding their own children to the generational pattern, passing down the dysfunction like a toxic heirloom. I can't save them all. I learned that lesson with Marcus and Raymond. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, who's more comfortable in their dysfunction than they would be in health. All you can do is model a different way, share your experience, and hope that something resonates. But for those who are ready, who've hit their own moldy plate moment and are desperate for change, for them, I can offer what I wish I'd had at 19, validation that their frustration is justified, assurance that boundaries aren't cruel, and evidence that there's life, beautiful free, chosen life, on the other side of enabling. Because there is. I'm living it. My mother is living it. Thousands of people who've broken their own family cycles are living it. It's not always easy, healing rarely is, but it's real, and it's possible, and it's worth every difficult conversation, every slammed door, every accusation of selfishness or cruelty. Those moldy plates under my brother's bed, they saved my life. Not in a dramatic, life-or-death way, but in the quiet way that moments of clarity do. They showed me what I was accepting, what I was enabling, what I was sacrificing my future for. And in seeing that clearly, I found the strength to choose differently. So here's to the moldy plates in all our lives, the moments that disgust us into action, that clarify what we can no longer accept, that propel us toward change even when change feels impossible. May we all find ours before we lose ourselves entirely to the dysfunction we're trying to fix. And may we remember, always, that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's fear wearing love's mask, and it serves no one, not the giver, not the receiver, not the generations watching and learning what family means. Real love says, I care about you, and I care about me too. I want the best for you, but I won't sacrifice my own growth for your comfort. I'll support your journey toward health, but I won't enable your dysfunction. I'll always love you, but I'll love you from a distance, if proximity means losing myself. That's the love I practice now, in my work and in my life. It's the love my mother learned to practice, finally, after decades of confusion about what love meant. It's the love I hope Marcus will someday be capable of giving and receiving, though I've released my attachment to that outcome. And it's the love I wish for anyone reading this who sees their own family in my story. You deserve more than to be the perpetual giver in relationships with perpetual takers. You deserve more than to sacrifice your dreams for people who won't even sacrifice an hour of gaming time. You deserve more than to be the only adult in a family full of people who are old enough to know better. Your moldy plate moment is coming, if it hasn't already arrived. And when it does, I hope you'll have the courage to see it for what it is. Not just a disgusting mess to clean up, but a symbol of everything that needs to change. And I hope you'll find the strength to be the one who changes it. Even if you have to do it alone, even if everyone calls you cruel for refusing to enable anymore. Because on the other side of that decision is freedom. Freedom to build your own life, to choose your own priorities, to love without losing yourself. It's waiting for you, just past the fear and guilt and accusations. All you have to do is take the first step, and then the next one, and the one after that. Until one day you look back and realize you've traveled miles from where you started, that the dysfunction that once defined your life is now just a story you tell to help others find their own way out. That's my story. From moldy plates to freedom, from enabling to empowerment, from sacrifice to self-respect. It wasn't the journey I planned, but it's the one that made me who I am. And despite all the pain along the way, I wouldn't change it. Because without it, I might never have learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop helping. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the dignity of their own consequences. And sometimes saving yourself is the only way to show others that salvation is possible. So here's to boundaries and the courage to maintain them. Here's to love that empowers rather than enables. Here's to all of us who've found our moldy plates and chosen to stop cleaning up messes we didn't make. We're not cold. We're not selfish. We're not cruel. We're free. And that freedom is the greatest love we can offer to ourselves, to our families, and to the generations coming after us who deserve better than the cycles we inherited. They deserve our courage, our boundaries, our refusal to pass down dysfunction as if it were a treasured family recipe. They deserve to see us choose differently, live differently, love differently. And so we do, one boundary at a time, one choice at a time, one moldy plate at a time, until the cycles that once defined us become nothing more than stories of what we overcame. That's my story. It's my mother's story. It might be your story, too. And if it is, know this: you're not alone, you're not wrong to want more, and you're not obligated to sacrifice your life for people who won't lift a finger to save their own. Your life is yours to live. Your dreams are yours to chase. Your future is yours to build. And anyone who tells you otherwise, well, they can clean up their own moldy plates. Because you've got better things to do. Like live.